3, 2, 1, go. Hello, and welcome back to whatever this is. Where do we go from here? Or
I don't
other
know. Where
name
do we go
pending.
from here?
I
Yeah.
don't know. Oh, I like that. I like
TBD.
that.
Yeah.
I like that. Where
It's
do we
called
go from
TBD.
here? I don't know. As like a little give and take. Is that what
Yeah.
podcasters do? Is that their little intro set up with like the quips or the back and forth?
I have no idea. I think you have to have a bunch under your belt in order to kind of establish that.
Oh, okay. So you're telling me this doesn't come out pre-baked? This doesn't come out pre-baked.
I mean,
I
there might be a little bit.
I
I
think it
suppose the.
depends on the concept and the production value and all that
I
stuff.
was just gonna say, yeah, the production value. If you've got some sort of like Conan O'Brien or something podcast, is
Yeah,
probably a lot more.
it's probably a lot more going on there.
Yeah.
Whereas here, since I'm doing the production, I run an amateur esports org, as I've told you, but for context for the talking part of this, I run an amateur esports organization. We play League of Legends in North America, and it's all silver, gold, and platinum teams, and it's in organized tournaments and things like that. And I do a lot of streaming for that. I'll cast our games, or I'll get friends to come, or other production people that I know to come cast our games with us, or do all this kind of stuff. It's really cool, but it's not tournament official stuff. It's like our own in-house. Well, I'll do it for our teams when we're not being streamed by the tournaments we're playing in,
Yeah.
because they'll try to stream every team throughout the tournament season at least once. And we call them scuffed casts because everything that goes wrong, that can go wrong, does go wrong on my broadcasts. So here, for instance, I might be modulating the audio levels as I learn how audio and amateur audio engineering works. Because I was listening back to the last one we recorded, and I think I had you a little too quiet, Steve. But
Yeah.
it's all part of the fun. It's all part of the fun. So
Yeah.
scuffed production. Call it out, makes it more fun.
Yeah.
But anyways, how you doing, Steve? What are you drinking tonight?
Uh, some wine. It's Fireside. It's Firefly, I think is what it's called. Yeah.
Firefly.
It's sweet.
Ooh.
Yeah.
All right, okay, so
It's
is that
like
an
candy.
Iowa wine or is that otherwise?
I think so. Let me check, actually.
Only reason I ask is I have a buddy named Austin who's a chef, a former chef. He works in the insurance business now, so it's the Iowa trajectory. But one of the things he was telling me about was Iowa wines versus like California or wines from Italy or otherwise, and kind of why Iowa wine is really sweet and sugary in comparison. And I can go on like a 10-minute diatribe about that, but I want to find out what this
Yeah.
wine is first.
It's Marengo, Iowa. So yes.
So it's an Iowa wine.
Yes, it is Iowa.
So Iowa wines are
It is.
traditionally really sweet. And part
Okay.
of that is because, well, I'm going to give you some preface. Well, actually,
Oh, please do.
as always, my talent is to give hours of preface for a simple concept. So the
Yes.
core is that the quality of the environment in Iowa is really high for plants to grow. Hence, we have so much corn and agriculture and stuff like that. Now, in wine culture, and I don't know if this applies to outside of the wine industry, but it's this idea. It's a French term, terroir. I think it's Terrior. I don't know if that's the right spelling, but terroir
Sure.
is this idea of like terroir is a term to encompass the entire environment. So the climate, the weather, so the climate and the weather, the soil quality, the irrigation, all the things, how volatile everything is, the whole nine. And the grapevine, depending on where it's grown, the better the terroir, the less hardy the grapes will be. So in California, in Italy, where there's like, especially in like the mountains or the more rugged areas, the terroir is really abrasive and the plants struggle to survive. And I kind of did this experiment with my geraniums.
On
And
accident.
no comment. I did this experiment with my geraniums where I beat. Well, I like it's. My friend Austin, when he said this, he sounded very Bob Rossi, where it's like beat the crap out of the brush. I just beat the shit out of my
Yeah.
plants,
Happy
and
little accent.
a little less, a little less waters. Don't give them good soil. Kind of, not aggressive. Don't try to kill them, but just restrict them.
Yeah.
And the geraniums would flower, big, beautiful flowers on the regular. And what he was telling me, Austin was telling me about how, like in California and Italy, et cetera, a lot of times you can get these you have this terroir that's really abrasive, and that promotes the plant responds to that negative environment by promoting a hardier fruiting body, the grape. So and I think it's just like it's a chemical reaction to promote like survival, right? Instead of being happy and complacent and just the plant just grows and has hardy leaves and thick vines and all that stuff, instead the energy that it has is applied to the fruiting body so that it can make offspring. Since it's like, I'm gonna, not to anthropomorphize the plant here, but it's like, I'm gonna die, gonna make some offspring and see if they can survive. So you get these really hardy grapes that have a lot of like meat to the fruit, and that comes with a lot of natural sweetness, natural sugar, and that's why there's a lot more nuance and flavor in the wine coming from those areas. Whereas in Iowa, we have happy plants. So they make little scrawny baby grapes that taste really tart and sour if you were to make just, if you weren't to do anything with it. So we just dump crap tons of sugar into our wine to make it actually sweet. So our wine is kind of more aggressively sweet than the more nuanced sweet of stuff from like California or other places that have a more abrasive, more negative terroir. That's how I understand it, which I find really fun. And this is also why no one likes to hang out with me, because I have stupid trivia facts about too many things. You want to talk about lichen? We're not going to talk about lichen today.
So the too long didn't read was because the environment is better in Iowa. Grapes
it makes
aren't
worse
as hardy,
wine.
strangely enough. And so we compensate with sugar.
Yep. Yep.
I like it.
It's
kind of like McDonald's putting sugar in everything.
Yeah, honestly, it kind of is like the McDonald's logistics system is so effective that you kind of lose the flavor along the way or something. I don't know what I'm talking about. That's not a strong analogy.
Yeah, I once checked the ingredients of it was a ketchup that McDonald's used, and I think they usually say that one of the first, the order of the list of ingredients is often sorted by the composition. So whatever is the most is the first on the list, sort of thing. And I swear that when I checked their ketchup, it was sugar. Sugar was the number one ingredient, or pretty high up there, relative to, other ketchups and stuff. Which makes sense because I always found, I don't know if this has changed since then, but I always found at that time their ketchup to be a lot sweeter than others, and made their food taste a little. The food doesn't taste good in general, but it made it taste a little bit better because it tasted.
McDonald's has a couple items on their menu that are just guilty pleasures for me, I tell you.
Yeah.
The Big Mac is, I think it's more nostalgia than it is actually being something I enjoy. I remember growing up out in Central Texas, and we'd go to Oak Hill, which is a town between where I grew up and Austin. And we would go and we'd get, every once in a while, like after karate, and it wasn't karate, it was Kuk Sool Won, which is like a South Korean martial arts. But anyways, we'd go to martial arts or soccer practice or some event downtown for school or something. And then, not downtown, in the city, because we lived like somewhere. An hour out. Doesn't matter. We come back, and every once in a while we'd get a Big Mac. Well, no. Yeah. We'd come back, we'd go to McDonald's in Oak Hill. We'd get ice cream, soft serve. I don't know if they have this anymore. They used to do, soft serve of like different varieties.
They do. Okay. If their machine's working, anyways.
Yeah, that's what it is. I feel like the machines are never working. Anyways, we'd get a soft serve, and my dad would always get a Big Mac, and I can't remember what I would get, chicken nuggets and fries or something. But I would always love. My dad hates pickles, but he's an Iowan at heart. Despite he's an Iowan at heart, so he doesn't like to bother service staff with like special requests. So he would never ask them to take the pickles off. So he would always take it off himself. And then I would get this box that when he was done with the Big Mac that had like all the lettuce and onion and pickle trimmings. And I would just like snack on that. And I always loved that so much. And every once in a while he wouldn't eat the whole burger, so I'd like take it and I'd finish it myself. So I have a lot of nostalgia for a Big Mac. Unclear if it's actually a quality food item or not.
No, it's not great. Their Egg McMuffins are pretty good though.
Yeah.
Those are the breakfast sandwiches. Oh man.
No nostalgia for you. It's actually quality food for you. No. Okay, sorry. Quality is the wrong term to use, but it's something that you like.
Yeah, it's actually it's all relative and subjective, but yeah, it's good for McDonald's food. That's sure. It ranks pretty high up there in their menu items. Their smoothies are pretty good too. The mango pineapple smoothie, it's
I
like
have
crack.
never had a McDonald's smoothie. Um,
Mango pineapple smoothie is phenomenal. I'll just say it's better than it deserves to be, given that it comes from McDonald's.
dude, I feel that way about. There's sometimes that I can't remember anything off the top of my head. Um, except maybe like Whataburger. Like, well, that's a different opinion, I guess. But I think Whataburger. Whataburger is my favorite fast food joint, and I feel like some of the burgers there, and the chicken strip sandwiches that they have and stuff like that are just like this shouldn't be this good for
Yeah,
a fast food place at this cost, right? Like
yeah,
sometimes those places just surprise you with like how the hell did they manage this out of the whole
right.
nine?
And Wendy's chicken nuggets is kind of like that.
Oh
Those are
yeah,
pretty
dude,
stellar.
the spicy Wendy's chicken nuggets, dude,
Haven't had the
those
spicy,
are
but
dangerous.
all of them, all around.
Yeah. Did you try? So yesterday I had a little get together and you were there.
Yes,
And thank you for coming. That was a lot of fun. A little going away party before I moved down to Texas in a couple weeks. I made some chili. Did you try the chili?
I did. It
What'd
was
you
good.
think? Was it okay?
A little spicy, but
Spicy?
it's so good. And
I appreciate
as you
that.
know, I'm not one that's big on spice, but I can still appreciate something that is spicy and good.
Right.
Um, I'm not a fan of when people kill something with spice for the sake of spice.
Yeah, I
It's just
understand.
not it's just not appealing.
The homeowner and host that was being very gracious to us yesterday, last minute plan switch. Sean, he like worse than you and Chris. I think it's about our coworker Chris level of like just can't handle spice. And he was like, you know
Uh,
what? I could eat this. I could eat this. I had to cut it with
yeah,
a lot of sour cream and cheese and crackers, but I got there.
yeah.
And I was worried for him especially. I wasn't. I know you're brave and you've got the heart of a lion and everything, and you can handle it.
Mm.
But
Oh yeah.
I was trying something, so I made the Texas style, which is nothing crazy. It just basically means without beans. Now to be
So
clear,
it's more meat heavy in the
very meat heavy.
ratio.
Yeah.
Yes,
The
I
recipe I
noticed.
was looking at online called for 4 pounds of chuck, of not ground chuck, just straight up chuck. I think. Because it called for that because of the consistent marbling that chuck has, like a lot of fat, and
Mm,
it's even throughout the meat, so nice to kind of
yeah.
get into the whole mix pretty well. I went to the grocery store and they had 1 pound, so I was like, let's just do something else. So I went a relatively fatty ground beef. But yeah, I did like 4 pounds of ground beef. I was worried that the Dutch oven I was using was not going to be big enough, but I was trying something. I don't know if this is the way to do it, but I put crushed red peppers in along with all the other spices
Oh,
with chili powder. I put chili powder, cayenne, crushed red pepper, jalapeno. I put a pretty good amount of stuff in there. I was pretty kicked. But the crushed red pepper was the kicker because like I'm putting it in, I'm pouring, and then I just tap a little bit too much, it just explodes out. And I look at a mound of crushed red pepper on the top of this chili that's cooking, and I'm like, I think I might kill Sean. I think I might
yeah. I
have
mean, you
just
could have
murdered
scooped it
Sean.
off. Yeah,
No, it was in there. It was already in there. It's food safety,
yeah,
man. I got to keep that stuff. I got to keep that stuff. Maybe
yeah.
I
Fair
had to
enough.
mix it in. I mean, I
Or
wasn't.
you just
If Sean
add more
died, I'll
other
just
ingredients.
inherit his house. Maybe I don't know.
I
He doesn't
don't
have a
think that's
will
how
yet.
that would work.
Well,
Oh
he
well,
did just
yeah.
do like life insurance and all this stuff, but I'll figure a way
Yeah.
out. I'll figure it
I
out.
feel like wills are something that a lot of people kind of forgo for a while, especially as you're younger. It's like probably not top of mind, which makes sense. But then at some point you get old enough, you're like, I think it's sometimes it's when you have kids.
I
I've
have
noticed.
noticed. I think most people, my friend Austin and his wife, I think they now have wills after their firstborn.
Yeah,
Um,
I feel like that's pretty common.
yeah.
You just
If I die, I don't
start thinking
really
about it
care where my
around
stuff
yourself.
goes. Like,
Yeah, that's the thing is once you have a kid, you start thinking external. You
yeah.
start thinking about people other than yourself, and
Oh, hey
you're like,
now. No,
and
it's all
then you're
good.
like, oh, yeah, and then it's like, oh, well, I've got this dependent human being,
That
and
like has
what
to
happens if I
exist. What,
go?
what, what if something happened to me? I need to make
Yeah,
sure this person is covered, and especially I think it applies well if you are, or it's more relevant if you're close with extended family too.
yeah,
Like I'm not close with any of my extended family. It's just me and my parents really.
yeah, same.
So like and they're still around if I pass, and they just kind of get all my stuff. I think I
Yeah.
did something about power of attorney that's related to that. Man, I don't know. I'm getting older though. I'm starting to learn
Yeah.
that stuff.
I don't know yet.
I don't know
Although one
either.
thing that my dad's parents did that I thought was a pretty sound thing was they had actually I don't know if it's technically part of the will or what, but basically you make arrangements for like you basically pay for all the funeral costs and you pick everything out that you want. You
Okay.
basically do all the pre-planning, have it all paid and all that because when it comes time, depending on who is responsible for that, they're probably not in the right state of mind to do that, and nor do they, you know,
My buddy works.
what
I think you
what
met.
flowers don't want to peck out and all that. It's just like it becomes a lot easier if it's already taken care of, and
Yeah.
sometimes that stuff costs a lot of
There's
money.
a whole
So
industry built around that. My
yeah,
buddy Aaron, who you met yesterday, the
hmm
guy showed you the basement stuff, right?
yeah.
Um, he works for a company like that where
Oh
but
wow,
like he works in the IT side that like it's a whole tech industry built around this about creating plans and insurance plans and
yeah,
things like that about supporting end of life circumstances. And
yeah,
it's very morbid, but at the same time, some of the stuff that he gets to do is actually kind of cool in that like in the services they get to provide to families, all
hmm
on the predication of lots of money being exchanged.
yeah. Under the guise of comfort for the family. Yeah, yeah,
Right, right. But in a world we live in, it's hard to have the community support and maybe it's never been that way really in at least I don't know. Kind of losing the thought there, but it's kind of this idea of like when you're so disconnected as a community, right? Like
yeah,
your community doesn't really support the grieving process or whatever. Like, or you it takes a lot more work to get
hmm
connected with the community more. Like, I don't know my neighbors. I don't know. I live in an apartment
yeah,
complex in a city, so that's maybe a little different. But that's kind of the point, right? Like, there's not a lot of.
yeah,
I remember when I was growing up, there was some pretty strong connection in the neighborhood, and when someone was going through something or someone passed away, the community did come forward and help them out and stuff like that. But not
hmm
with funerals or burials or anything like that. But at the same
yeah,
time, the trade off is we have all the amenities that we do to a degree, I guess. I'm kind of rambling,
yeah.
but
I think it was maybe different too, and for other generations. I know I've talked to mutual people, people we know that are Indian from India, and the culture there is a little bit different. And I suspect older generations in the United States, the culture was a little bit different in the sense that um, even your family was a bit of a community.
yeah,
Sometimes if you had more people in the family or family was just closer by, if people weren't moving as far away by virtue of, costs or whatever, or, just you kind of lived in the
circumstances.
same,
Yeah.
yeah, you just kind of lived in the same area. So you had family to rely on, and that could become your community, and things become a bit more distributed and as far as costs or um, energy and requirements for somebody passing away, and we probably have deviated from that a lot, to the point where people are a bit more isolated.
I wonder, and none of it's like inherently good or bad. It's just different, right?
Yeah,
Um, and it takes more than just saying the fact that it's different to determine if something is good or bad. There's all the context that goes into stuff and all that. It's so curious, like how quickly the relationship with death and the passing of someone and how a community or a culture or whatever like interacts with that and supports that and handles that whole circumstance. It's funny we've covered two things that kind of relate back to books I'm reading right now, we're approaching the end of the year, and I made a goal at the start of the year to read 10 books, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's a lot for me. I'm really good at reading like 60% through a book and then putting it down.
yeah,
So I have several books that are not even really that close to done. I've probably read 10 books worth of stuff, but I haven't finished 10
yeah,
books. Um, One of the books, I'm listening to it on audiobook, about 50-50, reading and listening. And it's by this guy named Tom Vitale, 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 not sure. But he was the director of Parts Unknown, the Anthony Bourdain show, and this is his book, In the Weeds. Talking about his experience on that show and with Anthony Bourdain. It was written a couple of years after Anthony Bourdain passed. And the section towards the end that I just read, I think it was about Bali. And they talked about how big and bombastic and significant a funeral was for the culture of Bali, for the people of Bali, or at least that part of Bali they were in. I'm not quite sure the geography of the whole dynamic there. But it was interesting because they described these funerals as like a big celebration of the cycle of life and death, and they would put the person like in Star Wars Episode 6 with Darth Vader on the pyre, cremating them on the pyre, and the family members light the pyre of the past individual. And it's kind of fucked up a little bit from our perspective. Like when they talk about this in the book a little bit, where it's like, in the West, at least the United States especially, we are really separated from death. We put it away. We're terrified of it, and we don't know how to. Well, no. Yeah. I don't want to draw the broad street statements, but we sterilize, and we don't really become as intimately familiar with this idea of death.
Right.
And that's not universal across Western cultures. That's just talking from the United States perspective. But in this particular locale in Bali, it's a big part of their community and the cycle of their community. And so the family members will go and light this pyre and cremate their loved one, and it's a big celebration and all this other stuff. And I haven't gotten to the end of that chapter, but he had just confirmed for the show that there was it was funny. It's their fixer. Everywhere they go, they have a fixer, the person that gets them all the cool opportunities in the location they're at, right?
Yeah.
Their fixer was like, "Hey, great news! 3 people died. One of them was a priest," or something to that effect. And and Tom was like, "Great! Sorry, great!" and because of it being the fixer kind of hyped it up. They were saying, this is like a big deal for us, and we'd love to share this on your show and all that. And it's just talking about that relationship with death and the relationship with funerals and how that changes by location and across time. It's so interesting to me. Yeah. It was interesting listening to that and interesting reflecting on my experience with funerals and loved ones passing and stuff like that. I was born, my parents were old. My dad was like 43 when I was born. He's 70 now. My mom was in her late 30s, very late 30s, and I'm an only child and everything like that. My grandparents passed like by the time I graduated college, but I think my last grandparent passed away before I graduated college, and then uncles and aunts passed away while I was growing up. Whoo, burps! Passed away while growing up, and everything. It started in middle school with my grandfather with Alzheimer's, and going to the funeral and seeing my father cry, and then seeing my mother cry, and seeing all these other things, and like kind of getting this association with it. Like, it hasn't numbed me by any means. It's just, it's been interesting to see that from a young age, and then as some of my friends and their loved ones start aging and passing away, it's interesting seeing how we as a community react to it, and then how maybe that differs by how we feel inside, right? So I remember elements of confusion when I was younger. So I didn't really understand this concept, and I was looking towards the people around me, I think. I don't really remember because it was middle school and a long time ago, but I was looking to the people around me. What do you do when
you're a kid?
Yeah, exactly. You look to the people around you to understand. And it was a whole gamut. It's a whole gamut. It was really somber and really like moody and melancholic. And then there were moments where people would come and celebrate. A whole mixture of things.
Yeah.
But it's curious. But yeah, the point of bringing that up is the last couple of years, especially with COVID, man, I got COVID real bad. I was coughing so much, my throat felt like it was lacerated. I had blood in my spittle, like all that kind of stuff. I think I just lost a day of consciousness, like in and out. It was foggy. It was crazy.
It's like not heavy drinking, you know.
Oh yeah, but I didn't have any of the fun highs. It was all like just all the hangovers and the worst highs and stuff. But in the last couple of years, I've been trying to get more comfortable with the idea of death and approaching it and looking at it and staring it down a little bit. It's not always easy. It's not always great. I don't know if I'm equipped for it based on my upbringing and the community and the stuff that I've been surrounded with, media, pop culture, my own experiences, literature, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
But when I hear about other cultures outside of the United States and how they handle death, it's always just so fascinating, these drastic differences between different places.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot to unpack about the perception of death, and for one thing, how much religion is shaped by that kind of idea. Um, but yeah, it's as you were kind of describing that, I recently, um, I forgot what I was listening to, but um, I think they were referencing maybe some monks, um, probably Buddhist monks, that were talking about death. And one guy in particular said that he was looking forward to it, and not in a sort of morbid way of
Right.
like can't wait to die, but it's one of those things that I've talked about reframing certain
Yeah.
thoughts, and so it's a matter of you take the assumption that you probably will die at some point someday, and
It's a
the
good
fact that
assumption.
it's
If you were to make a bet on it, you would
yeah,
do well.
death and taxes, as they say. So if the assumption is there that that's going to happen, and that's going to happen to people around you that um, why not frame it in such a way that you're almost relieved? I've heard of people saying that they have had near death experiences, whether it's whatever you make of that. They said that they felt a feeling of relief, that all of the sort of stressors of life, and depending on what your situation is as far as your age and your health and all that, you may not be feeling so hot. And so to kind of shed that, and potentially move on to not having to deal with a lot of life's rigors, and all that, can be not refreshing in a sort of way, but it's a shedding um, of a lot of stress and grief and all that. And so it's kind of putting a button on your life, putting a finality to it. It's similar to you quit a job, and you're tying up your loose ends, and then you finally get out and you're like, all right, that's done. Time for a new chapter in my life. And I kind of liked I still like that thought and that approach of, yeah, it'll be, it's a time of transition. We don't know what's going to happen afterwards. So just, look forward to having the transition happen. And not to say that, the only thing that I worry about, or that I think about with respect to death, is I don't want it to be painful, and I don't want it to be long and drawn out. Whatever happens, it's like, okay, I'm ready for it. Just and I think once you can kind of shed that sort of dread of, it could happen at any moment, or it's going to happen eventually, whatever it is that weighs you down about that thought process, it's a lot more freeing, because it's just kind of, well, at least I won't have to go into work, or there's a lot of that kind of, it's a duality, there's that side of it that you can think about as well, rather than dwell on the sort of sterile, like weird side of of death. You know.
I muted myself on stream there. Whoops. Scuffed production there. Um, but one of the things that
We can edit it out post. It's fine.
we can edit it back in, out.
I don't know. They
Oh, I
always say
can't
we'll
because
edit.
the recording didn't catch the audio. Doesn't matter. I have a quote that I think is very relevant to what you were just talking about. I also have a tangent. I want to catch myself before I go on that tangent. So I'm going to read
Yeah.
you this quote. I came across this quote through the venerable literary tool Instagram, but it's from a man named Alfred Hitchcock, and he was like being asked like, what is happiness to you? How do you define happiness or whatever? And you were talking about like the open-endedness of death. Like there is nothing, right? Like it's an opportunity to like there's no expectations, there's no requirements, there's no work, there's nothing that you have to do, that you get to go unburdened into that next step in this, in whatever the cycle is, right? And he talks about, in his response to that question, like what is happiness or whatever, it's kind of the same idea of like a clear horizon, nothing to worry about on your plate, only things that are creative and not destructive. I can't bear quarreling, I can't bear feelings between people. I think hatred is wasted energy, yada 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 yada. But to him, happiness is this idea of like a clear horizon. There is, and I kind of took that based on where I'm at in life. I was kind of applying that to myself, and I was like, man, the transition I'm going into in terms of moving, I'm going fully remote, and I'm going to go move back home with my parents for a bit before moving out west. And there is nothing besides just work. But I've kind of, even then, it's like I do what I have to do, and if I don't do well enough and I have to leave that job for whatever reason, I'm very lucky in life that I can burp my way through a conversation and also survive, like, and find a new job and stuff like that. But like letting go, the process of letting go and clearing my own horizon a bit has been really emotionally freeing. But it's also been an exercise in practicing like a little death. In like the party we were at yesterday, the get together, it was a send off for myself and a huge portion of my friends that I built here over the last 9 years. It's my chosen family. I don't have siblings, and I'm, like I said, I'm not close with my extended family. But so this is the people that I share my life and my emotions with, and they're my support structure, and I'm part of their support structure. It's my family. And then to be leaving that, at least geographically, the beauty of the internet is maintaining those connections or being able to maintain those connections, but it's not going to be nearly as intense as it is now. But I'm leaving that, and it's to a lot of people here, I'm going to be in many ways as good as dead. I'm not going to be a part of their life. I'm going to be a memory. I'm going to be, and I don't say that negatively. It's just the fact of me leaving leaves them with all the things that I was to them. And in the present and in the continuous present, right, I'm not going to be there. I'm not going to be a part of that world. And for me, it felt like a little death, like a small death. Like I'm still alive and conscious, and to see it, and to see where things go afterwards. But it's also practice. It's an element of practicing the big letting go of things and clearing that horizon out. Very sad and very freeing and very like it's so bittersweet, right? It's so melancholic and exciting at the same time. It's like looking at a beautiful sunset, right? Like you're filled with with just warmth, and you get to admire the beauty of the colors and the texture of the world around you. But at the same time, it's fleeting and fading in a moment, and it's at once like a vision into the next day, and it's the remnants of the current day, the remains of the day, which is a great book that I read a long time ago. I can't remember the author. But anyways, it's and the reason I want to bring that up is, I think, the idea you're talking about, where like death is that individual reframing death and reframing our relationship with it, takes practice. One of my good friends, he has an app on his phone that reminds him of death once every day. It says, "Hey, you're gonna die," and it gives him some quote or some. And all this other stuff, but it's kind of, I mean, what is it? Buddhism. Like I think Buddhism has some tenets to it where it's like it is a valued practice in the way of the Buddha. I don't know what the right term would be for that, but it's a valued practice to meditate every day for a little bit on death, and in Taoism kind of emphasizes the letting go of things and being a part of the flow and one with the Tao, and all these things kind of revolve around practicing the letting go and practicing, and so that maybe when you come to the big moment or the extended moment, whatever it might be, you're equipped for it, and it becomes not less scary, but you're more prepared for it. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, I think. Kind of the unburdening yourself. It's somewhat similar to unburdening internal stressors and uh, overthinking and the sorts of rumination and anxiety that comes with thinking about the past or worrying about the future. And in a certain sense, there's a certain parallel to that because, if you say, do you think about your mortality? Do you think about death and all that? And the sort of reframing for me is kind of, it's something that I accept. And as I've unburdened myself from that, it becomes a sense of when you're burdened by it, it consumes a lot of your thoughts and your energy. And by unburdening yourself from that, it becomes something you don't think about. And
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
it's not that you never think about it. It's just that I only have so much time and energy at any given moment, and I choose to instead think about sort of what you alluded to of that future horizon of when you do move, all of the things that I want to do, that I want to create, that I want to move into. So, like, kind of metaphorically speaking, that consumes me and that brings me happiness and joy. It's kind of a dual purpose thing. It's
Yeah.
kind of I'm I'm not thinking about death, so that's a positive, but I'm also thinking about the things that do bring me happiness and joy. It's just again it goes back to why bother? Why
It's gonna
bother
happen eventually.
stressing?
So
Yeah. Yeah.
there's a part of me. There's a part of me that kind of just says, "I'll get to it when I get to it." like
Yeah.
like I'll get there eventually, so I guess I won't fret about it. And then hopefully I've lived a full enough life that I'm not too terrified to let go of it.
Yeah.
But like
And if you didn't, what? I mean,
I
who
can't
cares?
control that. What I
Yeah.
can there, and that, we've talked about this a lot.
You've
There's
learned your
such
lesson for the next time around,
if
right?
there's another time, I'll try better. We'll see
Yeah,
what
if you
happens.
remember. Yeah.
Um, but there's this quote from a character in Overwatch 2, the video game. His name's Zenyatta, and it's like at the start of a match or whatever. You're in the waiting room before the doors open, and he says something to the effect of like, "Those who are afraid of losing have already lost." And I'm like,
Yeah.
"Damn, dog, that's pretty. That cuts right to the heart." Also,
Yeah.
can you click on heads a little bit better, Zenyatta, please, and thank you. Um, but
Man, you're full of good quotes today. That's a good one.
I like it a lot because it's
Yeah.
and there's iterations of that quote, right? Like,
I
stared at
think
the
Mike
sun, you go
Tyson had a
blind.
similar.
Miss the forest for the trees. Like, if you fixate on
Yeah.
something, you miss what it is.
Yeah.
You miss the scope of it. Like,
But there's also a sense of if you uh if you're consumed by that failure, you don't have any room in your mind for the success. And so
yeah,
you can think about 1,000 ways that you might fail, and you maybe manifest those self-fulfilling prophecy of
because
failure
it's all
if you do that.
you've equipped yourself only with this toolkit, right? Like you
Yeah,
mentally see the world in one way, and that's the only way you can see the world. But if you don't
exactly.
practice other ways, like it's not ignore death, and it's also not only fixate on death. It's the
Yeah,
balance of the two. I think is I haven't lived a whole life yet, so I can't tell you. I'm no authority, right?
yeah, yeah,
But what I feel like kind of works is um, have a healthy respect for death and understand that toolkit. It's like different philosophies, right?
mhm,
Stoicism, Taoism, Buddhism. I don't know if it's fair to call that a philosophy or religion. I don't know, but these ideas, nihilism, hedonism, all these things are less moralistic rules on life. Like
mhm.
they don't, and this is a difference between I think like traditionally like Western like religion and the philosophy that a lot of Western religion, at least through like church and stuff, like more casual church. Not I'm not the more common church going type experience versus
Mhm.
philosophy, especially Eastern philosophies, is there's like the difference between moralisms, hedonism, and we might have talked about this last week, but like hedonism and stoicism kind of attack this idea of like how to achieve the most of one thing. Hedonism, or how do you achieve a full life?
Yeah,
Stoicism is like minimize pain, whereas
yeah,
hedonism is maximize pleasure. which kind of sounds like the same thing, but it's two sides of the same coin, right? Like it's the focus and it's two lenses, neither one of which is the absolute right or the absolute wrong or morally better than the other. It's to be a nihilist about it. It's what you make of it, right? And that's another thing. Nihilism is kind of nothing means anything. You apply meaning how you want to apply meaning and value.
Yeah.
And these are all toolkits, right? And if you only use one toolkit, you're only going to see the world in one way. You're going to be able to approach it in one way. If you see the world as nothing but death, you're not going to be able to experience the life that you have. And if you see life and you don't accept that there is death, you don't approach the fact that you will die and that there is a finiteness to it, then you won't ever be able to, I think in the same way, live the full life and be able to be happy and put yourself, maybe not, I don't necessarily know what that looks like, because I'm maybe more on the first camp than the second one of I get a little bit too stuck on death, so I don't know what it feels like to just be like, I'm never gonna die, right? But the point is that balance.
I don't know that it's a sense of like I'm never going to die, but it's maybe a sense of if you're more present in the moment than anything,
I think if you don't,
and if you're more mindful of being trying to be in the moment at any given time, that moment of death becomes so much further away. Just despite your age, because again, it's a pretty large unknown for a lot of people. So the more time you spend in the present moment, the further off that feels.
Yeah.
And you have a sense for that. And so it's just, and there's also, it's not to say that you are living life in such a bombastic, risky way that, I'll never die. I'm going to go jump out of a
Carpe diem, motherfucker.
Yeah, it's you're not jumping out of a plane without a parachute. It's still tempered. It's still based in reality. I think it's somewhat similar to when people talk about trying to be, I don't know if mindful is the right word, but even the Stoicism approach of not necessarily getting invested emotionally in a lot of things. There's maybe some confusion on what that means, in a sense of you become a unfeeling, senseless robot where you never feel any emotion. And I think to kind of bring it back to the sort of balanced approach of saying you strip away or unburden yourself of the frivolous things. If somebody cuts me off in traffic, don't get invested emotionally into that. But something like having a child, getting married, there are things that for sure should bring you happiness and joy, and feel those feelings. But the rest, thinking about death, what if you had a certain amount of time, whether it's in your lifetime or 5 minutes to think about whatever you want, are you going to spend that 5 minutes thinking about death, or are you going to spend it thinking about your friends and family and things that bring you happiness? To me, that's what it. Yeah, that's kind of what I bring it all back to.
Man, it's such an interesting conversation, and I wish that I had been. So I went to Catholic school, and I don't necessarily want to crap on Catholic school too much. But it's not uncommon to go to Catholic school. I'm not saying it's the most common thing, but it's not uncommon to go to Catholic school and then be not religious at all afterwards.
That's done for the rest of your life. Just kidding.
I have some friends who also went to Catholic school and had an absolutely awful go of it, and it's left them kind of like emotionally and philosophically scarred, or whatever whatever that would mean. But sure. Not better off, worse for wear. I did not have such a bad go of it. I had a great education, and it wasn't until college that I was really like, maybe this whole God thing's not quite. Maybe this isn't quite what it is for me. Maybe I don't quite get vibe with this so much. But I had a much softer breakup with that whole experience. But it did kind of how do I say it? It over that experience and education. I felt like it over-indexed on the waving away of the impact of. Not say waving away. It's weird. It's weird. Every semester I had to take a theology class, and every semester and in those theology classes we learned a lot. One thing that was awesome is like I had an entire semester, and I say awesome in terms of the value it brought to my life. The course and the class was dark and depressing and traumatizing and sobering for a 17-year-old. It was an entire semester, right, of the Holocaust. The entire semester studying the Holocaust and everything about it, from the politics to the trauma to philosophy about life and stuff. And it's like
pretty heavy.
Yeah, it's very heavy, but it was incredibly important for me to experience and understand. We went to Holocaust museums. I remember when I was in middle school, we even went to the Holocaust Museum in D.C. on a week-long field trip. As part of that, we went to like the whole mall and everything. But anyways, super important. And so I don't want to sit here and say I didn't have a nuanced education through my Catholic school. I got very lucky. I went to a very progressive Catholic school. But at the same time, kind of outside a lot of that, there's always this given about life and heaven and the moral structures of this interpretation of the Bible and all these things. And like kind of moving on past that in life is like, it's kind of told me, I feel like it's not that nuanced, or it's not that black and white. Like there's a lot of nuance to this idea of death and how we approach morality and how we approach values and the time we spend on things. One thing that was crazy that felt, and this is I think the Catholic side of it all, is like there's like this karmic balance to life that a lot of time that I was kind of taught to see things through. You mess up or you do something bad, you go, try to wipe away some of that sin. You do 3 marks against you and you do a nice thing, get 3 stars. Now you're net 0. You're in limbo.
Yeah.
It's like that's
no
not
carbon emissions for you.
Yeah. It's like that's not really how that. I feel like that's just not how. I mean, that's not how the world works. That's not how my experience in life has worked. It's not someone does a good thing and that erases the bad things they've did and now it's net 0, right? Or like there's not like The Good Place, the TV show, where they have this whole plus and minus system for things that you did and said and all that stuff to get you into the good place. The Good Place is a great show on this topic of like exploring the flawed nature, trying to quantify humanity, right? How do you quantify the good and bad of humanity and create this karmic system? You really can't.
Yeah.
I mean, there's obviously awful things to do and there's obviously amazing things to do, but you can't narrow someone down to this person's a plus 10 or this person's a minus 3,000, right?
Yeah. It's an unfortunate perversion of certain aspects of the human experience, I feel like, that has come from religion, unfortunately, and not to get down the rabbit hole of that, but there are a lot of great things that religion has done for individuals and for societies and communities, and there's a lot of bad things. And so I think, this sort of, I just think that there's kind of there's a perversion of that in the sense that there's a manipulation of, again on the topic of death, that sort of fear of death that comes in, that people get kind of preyed upon and coerced to try to do certain things. Usually, in modern society, it's the right thing. In older societies, not always. Some of that's kind of subjective too, relative to the society at a given time. It used to be the case that you could, there's all sorts of rules on marriage, and if your wife, how did that go? If your husband died, then you could be married to his brother. I don't know. There's weird guidelines, as why there are. I don't know, but it's really unfortunate because I think there could be a lot that could be done to sort of make people feel not as bad about death. And
right.
I mean, I know the concept of heaven exists and all that, but for some people like myself, there's a bit of an inflammation that happens around that. It's sort of allergic reaction to saying, "Oh, you don't know," and yet you're telling me definitively that this is the case. Whereas
that's one of the hard parts, is like it's the definitiveness that I think for the two of us, we're talking from a perspective of being exposed to a lot of like Catholic and Christian belief structures. At least for me, I'm assuming. I haven't really been exposed to like how people practice like Judaism or like Middle Eastern or Eastern religions and cultures and stuff, or traditions and stuff like that. I really just know my experience with Catholic and Christian focused stuff, and a lot of the weirdness of that relationship. A lot of times, and just the representation of pop culture. And I don't use pop culture like movies alone, just like media and just how the stuff that gets kind of put across, that gets to me. That's not just the stuff I see locally, but just media in general kind of puts forward this idea for a lot of religions of the finality and moralisms and stuff, and like absolutism. And that's the hard part. And I think I agree with you. For me, is like it's hard to ever really draw a hard line about, especially life and death, right? There are certain things that I feel comfortable drawing hard lines on in terms of like what I think is a moral good or a moral bad, based on who I am and my perspective and my influences in life and all that stuff. But when it comes to like life and death and saying, yeah, there's a heaven and this is how you get in or anything, it's like, how do you know? How can you say with definitiveness this stuff? And then and then how do you talk around that?
Mm-hmm.
How do you have a conversation around that? Because human beings, we like to talk, we like to converse, we like to be a part of. We're social. We like to talk to each other and digest these ideas in a social space. And sometimes it gets kind of tough to have those conversations when there's something that's so treated absolutely. To the point of my education, I really appreciated a couple of my teachers in high school. Yeah. We did have some of that nuanced conversation. Not always.
And I think that's the key is having that conversation and just explore the topic rather than. I know for me personally, and I know we've discussed this. I don't. I'm of a certain mindset. I don't necessarily like being told what to do, in certain ways, which I think oftentimes is why I tend to gravitate towards attempting to be my own boss and have start my own business sort of thing. But it's not that I like to just rally against the man and that sort of thing. But
I do.
I'm here
for it. Anarchy all the way, baby.
It's just a sense of when anybody tries to tell me definitively this is the way, this is it divorces. It does be, and I think it's because, to kind of tie back to what you said, there's a divorce from the from reality, the reality of the fact that life is nuanced, and to tell me definitively this is it, this is very prescriptive of what is going to happen to you and all that. I just don't have a positive reaction oftentimes, because I would much rather have the nuanced conversation. I would much rather it's exploration. It kind of ties back to what you and I've talked about before of I want to learn, I want to grow, I want to understand things better. I don't want to be told this is just it and you can't question it anymore.
I think one of the there's a dynamic there. So there's the folks who are like, this is it, this is what it's going to be. If you're ever in a dialogue with them and they're just like, I'm not having any conversation about this. That kind of makes it easy to just be like, okay, and we're not going to talk about it.
And done.
And done. And that's no like issue either way, right? And I have very rarely in my life found anyone who's like, no, this is how it is, this is how it's going to be, and I'm not going to change my ways. And I need you to say the same, and I need you to be convinced. I've on the internet, I feel like you could see that conversation happen a lot. But in real life, I've so seldom had that because of, my circumstances in life. I've had a relatively privileged upbringing and been surrounded by, mostly people who don't want to push their agendas on others, at least directly. Usually it's the, Midwest nice and all that stuff. But what I was going to get at is the most interesting thing, and I think there's a difference between saying this is my like preferred toolkit to understand the world. This is my preferred. I like this hammer. I like this drill. I like this. I like I vibe with Stoicism or Taoism or Catholicism or this, that, and the other, or some combination or some amalgamation or whatever. Like they don't need a label necessarily. Like there's that, but there's also the ability to have that and then occupy another perspective, occupy and leverage the other tools to see a circumstance, and then allow that to kind of influence you. So there's this quote, I bet you I will say this almost every time we have a chat, but it's true voyage is return. It's this quote from Ursula Le Guin in the book The Dispossessed, which is another one of mine that's like 80% finished. I need to finish that book. I've reread like the middle section several times, but this one quote has really stuck with me, and it's True Voyages Return. And it's this idea, and there's lots of quotes out there about this. Basically, if you look up any travel quotes, from Bourdain to Mark Twain to everybody's got something about it. But I like True Voyages Return. It's nice, it's succinct. And what it gets at is to go on a journey, you have to wrap it back around. You have to go from A to B to A again. Because otherwise you've just translocated. You haven't really gone on a journey. You've just moved. A journey or a voyage is to go out and come back so that you can know through relativity and through juxtaposition kind of where you're at and what you gained or lost or changed, and you see the place you were differently and where you came from differently and all these things. And I think the same thing, that concept applies metaphorically too, right? To understand how I view the world, I need to go on a voyage of seeing how others might view the world. See and imagine myself in their shoes and imagine myself in those circumstances, or use that philosophical structure and apply that logically or illogically or emotionally, whatever, to what I see. And then when I return to my norm, I'll come back equipped with experience, even if it's just in my imagination. Even if I've just gone off to a galaxy far, far away, I come back equipped and I can grow and change and understand my own world that much better, that much differently. And that's the only thing that one of the most valuable things, and Robin Williams used to talk about this all the time about in life, is just, it's learning, right? Like the joy of life is to learn something new and always be seeking to learn something new and experience something new, that adventure, that journey into exploration. And so when it comes to these like philosophical conversations about like religion and life and death and morality, it's really important to accept your norm, your starting point, but also be able to practice. And it takes practice to step out of that space and go see those other perspectives and take the logic and understand the history and the culture and the thought process and all that stuff, and like inhabit that and see the world from that way and allow that to influence you so that you can learn and grow and live that more fulfilled life.
Yeah. And I think too that kind of ties back into the sense of like nuance and depth to any given thing, where you're not ever concretely yourself if you are constantly growing and learning, and you return back to yourself, but you're not the same. And so, and again, I think when somebody tries to make that this is how it is, that just does not. That's divorced from reality. Again, it's just you're not.
Because nothing ever is, right? Like a moment keeps
nothing's
passing.
Ever concrete. Right? Even concrete wears away over time. You know, Grand Canyon carved by eons of rivers flowing over a specific channel. It's going to happen. And again, I think that anytime, I think a lot of there's a lot of depression and anxiety to be had by trying to tie yourself down to something concrete like that insofar as thought and feelings.
That's a good point. It's like, what's the consequence? So we talk about like it's valuable to inhabit other perspectives and to learn and grow and try to have these voyages in life, literal, metaphorical, emotional, all that stuff. But like, what's the consequence about doing that? And I have a hard time defining that, but I think some of it does come down to your health, like can literally decline, right? Like if you don't move, if you don't walk down the road and back, and you just sit in one spot all the time, your physical health declines. If you're not
moving, you're dying.
If you're not moving,
that quote is.
If you're not moving, you're dying. Damn, I like that. I like that a lot. In the moment, at least, it seems to make a lot of sense to me. And the moving is not necessarily literal in this case. In my mind, the moving is kind of it can be applied metaphorically. Like take it how you want. Sure. But I'm thinking of it metaphorically here as well. Like go on these voyages. Go, and it doesn't even have to be like you can. There's a quote from a song I like where it's like he moved across the world by walking across his floor or walking across his living room or whatever. It's like you can go and see the world and imagine what it means to be on Mars and allow that to kind of grow you and change you and influence you by just sitting in your living room and closing your eyes. And by flexing that, you grow and you get to feel improve yourself, and I don't know how to quantify that very well. But I don't know if it needs to be quantified or can be quantified. But I just understand
Yeah.
that for me to be valuable and important for how I live my life.
Right. I don't think you can quantify it. I mean, it's so nuanced and subjective that it's just
Yeah, it's tough.
um, it's one of those things that is just more of a feeling. You know when it's happening, and
You know. Oh yeah,
yeah,
yeah, you know.
yeah. Do you
Well,
ever have those? Oh, go ahead.
no, go for it, go for it.
I was just gonna ask if you've ever had any moments on that kind of topic of. Well, let's save that for a different discussion. I think I know where you're getting at, but go ahead. I'll
Yeah.
save that for another discussion.
Okay,
I'll,
okay.
I'll
Write
make
it
note of
down.
it.
Write it down in the channel. And we can pin it as a topic to try to remind ourselves of. I was just gonna say we've just broken the hour mark,
Yeah.
and so I want to maybe try to like wrap things up a little bit. I wanted to ask you what you've been working on, or what you've been just as a closing segment of sorts. What have you been working on? What you've been reading? Is there anything kind of like fun in that world of making stuff and growing and learning?
Yeah, there's something that our colleague and mutual friend Chris shared. Let me look it up here real quick. And it actually fits in with what we've been talking about. And
God,
there's a guy,
Microsoft is yelling at me.
Michael A. Singer, and he has, oh, make sure I get this right, some books and talks and Returning to the Source, one of his
The
lectures.
Untethered Soul. Is that
The
the book
Untethered
that
Soul. That's the one that Chris has been talking
Chris
about.
recommended that to me too?
Yes.
I need to
But
look at it. I'm generally skeptical of literature in that vein sometimes. So
It was it's good. The link that he sent me, and I think you'll appreciate this. I enjoyed, however, he said he was being interviewed. He said to the interviewers, right? A lot.
oh
And,
my goodness.
It was
Just like me, right?
yeah.
Yeah, right? Yes,
And
Tex.
and you understand? And it was I don't know. And maybe it was intentional. This is what I said to Chris. I said maybe given what he was talking about, maybe it was intentional to try to rile up the listener and to get them to kind of
Yeah.
unburden themselves. And I think from what I gathered, the gist of it is a lot of just again that sense of unburdening yourself from the emotions and the attachment to this. Again, it's a sense of expectations where something might happen, and if it's not going to cause you pain and suffering, or cause other people pain and suffering, what value do you put behind the emotional weight that you should
Yeah.
put into that? So one quick example he gave was he kind of moved out into the woods and he bought some land and all that, and he's got these big open windows in his house, and he was sitting and meditating, and I guess some man had heard that he was out in the woods meditating, and don't know the guy's motivation, but the guy goes and he's just like walking in front of this guy's house. He's just like walking out on his property, and it's like, I guess
Some
the guy
guy
was
out in
just
the
kinda,
woods.
yeah, a guy dressed in like a old Roman tunic or something.
Whoa, really?
It was weird. It was strange.
All right.
Apparently, so uh, he kind of reflected on that. He's like, the common reaction is like, "What the hell is this guy doing in my
Get
property?"
the hell off my lawn, man.
Yeah, and so it happened a bunch of times, and he thought about it, and he's like, "Okay, well." Rather than get wrapped up to that, he invited the guy into dinner.
Was this happening
He
like
said,
multiple times or something?
yeah, and so
Okay.
he said something like, basically, do you want to come in and meditate and have dinner and all that? And so the guy's like, yeah, totally. And his idea, the Michael Singer, his idea of meditation was something like taking an hour or something, just really long time to really get into it. And I guess as he's sitting there doing that, the guy he invited in was getting like really antsy and fidgety and was this kind of ready to move on sort of thing. And so then they end up having dinner, and I didn't catch the full story, but something like he basically only offered a salad for dinner because that's just what he had had for dinner. And the guy, reluctantly accepted whatever, and basically just never came back. And so I don't know if there's an expectation of this other guy of what this experience would be like, but it ended
Interesting.
up kind of being killing two birds with one stone, where he basically unburdened himself, and rather than frame it as uh, having that kind of calcified expectation of like, how dare this guy exist on my property and not meet my uh, rules and
He
norms
reached
and
out to
expectations.
understand, to try to understand this guy, and he
Exactly.
applied no expectation. He just said he just opened
Yeah.
himself to the opportunity, to the chance, and
Yeah.
he was given information, and the information is the guy is kind of not really that interested in having a dialogue, and
Right.
now he doesn't show up no more. So like,
Yeah. And so,
okay,
as far as I can gather, that's kind of the gist of it. And I've had similar experiences. There was a time in my life when I was probably, I think I was about 30 years old, and I turned into. You've seen the movie Yes Man with Jim Carrey?
parts of it on TV when I was younger.
It's, it's a very similar concept of just kind of opening yourself to the world,
Hmm.
and rather than just kind of saying, no to everything, he decides to say yes. And there was a short period, where I kind of just opened myself to that sort of
Yeah,
why not? And
why
I
not?
remember being invited to go see what was it? See somebody play some band or something like that in Iowa City when I was still living in Des Moines.
Yeah,
I know it was like a Thursday night or something, and normally I wouldn't necessarily do that. It's not the weekend, whatever. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it.
wild child, Steve, breaking it down on a
Yeah, I know,
Thursday.
right?
Whoo!
And when you get old enough, it kind of you
Oh, dude,
start to understand why.
I feel like we closed out at 7
Yeah.
yesterday because everyone is old. We're old now. Anyways, keep going, keep going.
So the short of it is basically because of that, I ended up meeting um, a girl that I dated for a brief amount of time that was like a really, really great relationship.
Yeah.
And like I'm fond of that relationship. It's not something I continue to like dwell on or whatever, but it was
It
a great moment. It's a moment I can reflect on by opening myself up kind of to the universe, that I got a really great experience out of it that I can kind of like reflect on and think fondly of.
yeah.
And so, yeah, in answer, coming back full circle to what you originally asked, that's the thing that I had have experienced lately that I've kind of like
It's awesome.
grown from. He did say one other thing about expectations that I'm going to try to remember and write down.
Okay.
Oh, it was something about it's an interesting experience to try to so if you're not put together fully internally, if you're not happy with yourself and all that, it can be easy to seek that externally and try to want to let's say find a significant other
Hmm.
that will make you whole again and make you feel good and make you feel happy. But that's going to end probably pretty poorly.
And
That
it's
you need
unfair
to
to them and to yourself.
absolutely, and you won't ever find that. Like truly, you're not gonna. That's not gonna happen for you. Seeking something external, you need to figure it out internally, and become a good person that somebody else would want to date,
Hmm.
and fulfill yourself internally before you go seek that. You don't seek it
Yeah.
externally, but you find somebody else that has the same, hopefully, and then
I think I might
have
have
a
talked
great
about the.
relationship.
Have I talked about. Let's put a pin on that. That's a cool topic for next time.
Yeah,
Or at least to add to our topic list if we ever run it or struggle
yeah,
to find something to talk about. But this idea of, especially with relationships, I read this book earlier in the year, part of my 10 book goal by Marco Pure White. It's called The Devil in the Kitchen, I think. Um,
mm,
and he talked about relationships, and it's kind of ultimately the same takeaway. Where it's like you, the person that you share your life with, or the people, cannot are not going to fill the holes inside the lines that are you. They
yeah,
can reinforce and bring out and add color and vivacity to it all.
yeah,
But you have to fill out the color inside the lines. You've gotta add that shape and texture and color and heft to it all. Because if you don't, you're just going to suck from those others around you, and you're going to lose them, and you're going to lose yourself in the process. But that's really cool. I'll have to give that Untethered Soul thing a little look-see. For me, I am going to finish that In the Weeds book by Tom Vitale, however you say his name. And then I'm kind of on an Anthony Bourdain kick this year. I'm almost done with Medium Raw, which is his follow-up to Kitchen Confidential, which I read earlier this year. So my goal by next time we talk, not like that's some sort of assignment, but I'm hoping to be done with In the Weeds and maybe done with Medium Raw, because I'm like 60-70% done with that already. So but that's kind of all I had for today. We're about an hour 10 minutes in. It's been a good chat. Went by quick. I thank you for taking the time to chat. See, it's a lot of fun, and I think we'll just be right back at it next Sunday.
Sounds good.
All right. Have a wonderful weekend, everyone. Talk to you guys later.
All right. Later.